G'day guys and gal. Chaos seems to be the root of most people's problems. You party a bit too hard on the weekend and cause a demonic portal to open? Blame chaos. You stub your toe while jerking off, resulting in a pain-filled orgasm that causes you to become demonically possessed? Blame chaos. You get both a thought daughter and a gay son? Blame chaos. You get the picture. But what if chaos didn't exist? What if those nasty horned bastards that seem to cause so many issues just aren't a thing? Would the galaxy be a utopia? Or would it open up more room for a darker evil? Or perhaps would it force us to look upon ourselves and take responsibility for our own shitty life choices? We're about to find out. Before we do though, Natty Plus has been running for 1 year now. Happy birthday, what a ride. As a super quick TLDR, I was sick of the supplement industry promoting shit that didn't work because supplement companies would rather use cheap, unbioavailable ingredients than spend money on the shit that works. Which is a shame because there's plenty of supplements out there that do actually work and can really help people. So I said fuck those guys and I created a range of hero stack supplements featuring synergistic ingredients of properly dosed, properly bioavailable and properly studied ingredients. The results, supplements that work, with human trials and a ton of customer blood work to prove it. To save time, I won't deep dive into the results. You can find them on our website. However, there is a catch. Natty Plus supplements are not cheap because they are fucking expensive to make. However, with it being our birthday and against the advice of my marketing team, financial team, and Claude, we'll be running a 50% off sale site-wide for the next 72 hours. Everything is 50% off, so as long as you use the code Majorkill. This was the same offer we ran when we launched Natty Plus, so it feels right to offer it to you again, especially to you guys who were the ones that hard launched the company. Natty Plus has been incredible so far, changing a number of lives, so I'm very grateful for you guys for the support. Use the link or code Majorkill to get 50% off. Today we'll go over a galaxy without chaos. What would change, and would it truly be for the better? Let's get into it. Now, GW has retconned some old lore in a pretty obnoxious way. See, I like the idea that chaos is a threat amongst many to the galaxy, not the root of all issues. While that is kind of the case, after all the Tyranids, Orcs, and Necrons aren't related to chaos, it still has been stated that chaos has been present since the dawn of sentience and was even a threat to the Old Ones and the Necron tier. Fortunately, they did clap chaos pretty hard and put it on the bench, which does mean that if chaos didn't exist at all, the origins of Warhammer 40k would more or less be the same. Old Ones create a bunch of people, the Necron tier get mad that the secrets to not getting super cancer are not shared with them, they attack the Old Ones, they get molested, they discover the Catan, they get molested and turn into Necrons, they molest the Old Ones, then they molest the Catan in revenge, then they self-molest into a deep sleep. Damn bro, War in Heaven was a wild time. Nothing changes here regardless of chaos, as chaos is on the bench watching shit go down. Then funnily enough, chaos being present or not wouldn't have changed much for the next 60 million years. The Eldar gods reigned over most of the warp, with chaos confined to its own little corner. Sure, there were Xeno civilizations that rose and embraced chaos as their gods, with Be'lakor said to once command entire star systems, but space is big, and chaos, by its nature, is not a very stable or sustaining thing. So all chaos-based civilizations would eventually collapse, far removed from the notice of the Eldar. See, chaos only really became a proper thing beyond the occasional possession and forbidden occult lore when Slaanesh was born and the Eldar gods, the wardens of the warp, were consumed. Now, just because chaos doesn't exist in this what if, doesn't mean the warp is now a happy place. There are still many horrors within it, the enslavers, warp predators, and so on. Chaos didn't make the warp a scary place, the warp being a scary place allowed chaos to live within it. There is still tons of occult and forbidden lore you can access from the warp, which the Emperor would have done for sure. Sure, there would be some stuff, like the Tower of Babylon, where chaos cultists were using Annuncia, the language of the universe and likely the language the Old Ones spoke, to do some spicy chaos shit. However, their power came from Annuncia, which isn't chaos-based. If anything, it's anathema to chaos. So the Tower of Babylon lore could still be intact but slightly altered. I also believe the Age of Strife would still occur, since it was due to the Men of Iron uprising as well as the depravity of the Eldar. Sure, Slaanesh would not be born as chaos doesn't exist, however the Eldar were being sluts not because of chaos, but because they were bored. They would still be bored after 60 million years of playing on creative mode. Their combined psychic power being channeled into drug-fueled blood orgies would still create massive disturbances in the warp, likely leading to the same warp storms that caused the Age of Strife. Not to mention, the Eldar were also specifically engineered to be able to create gods from their shared belief and emotions, so while Slaanesh would not be created as she is a chaos god, there's a decent chance some other monstrous god, a dark Eldar god of excess, would be born in her stead. Now that does change the outcome a fair bit. This dark god would not be as powerful as Slaanesh and would fit into the Eldar pantheon instead of wiping it out. However, it would create a nasty stain on the souls of the Eldar. Likewise, its creation wouldn't blow up the Eldar Empire or create the Eye of Terror, so the Eldar would remain a powerful race. However, they could also potentially fracture into a civil war between those that worship the new slut god and those that do not. Either way, through the birth of this Eldar god or over time, the warp storms of the Age of Strife would clear, Empire, the Emperor launching his Great Crusade to unite humanity. This does beg another question. Would the Emperor be powerful enough to create the Primarchs without chaos? After all, he originally got a huge power up from entering the special warp portal on Molech, which gave him the knowledge and power to then create the Primarchs. Now annoyingly, the lore is very obscure when it comes to what actually happened in that portal. When Horus entered, he basically spent 1,000 years or so fighting in these giga-huge demon wars, gaining experience and power and becoming capable of being the avatar of the Chaos Gods. However, that is obviously not what happened to the Emperor. We also know that the Molech portal is unlike all other warp portals. I believed it was a direct link to a special part of the warp, or at least was. See, the lore also states that the Emperor cannot walk back into the portal a second time because the Chaos Gods would be waiting for him and they were super pissed off about what he did the first time in there. From all of these clues, I believe the portal on Molech was some kind of backway entrance into the warp that allowed the Emperor to get a one-up on Chaos. The theory is extensive, but heavily supported by the lore, with that theory being that the Emperor went into Molech and basically coerced or perhaps kidnapped numerous minor warp gods, non-Chaos warp gods that is, into the Emperor, giving himself a power boost, and then he used those warp god souls to create the Primarchs. Combining legendary biomancy, his own DNA, Urda's DNA, and the warp god souls to create the Primarchs. Chaos, seeing the warp as their domain, thus the warp gods as theirs, were infuriated by this. Thus, Chaos claims the Emperor stole power from them, while the Emperor claims they're cucks and they can suck his dick. So it does beg an interesting question. Would the Molech warp portal still be there, and would the Emperor still be able to get the same power boost and the ability to create the Primarchs if there was no Chaos? Well, if we go off the theory, then yes, I do not believe Chaos created the Molech portal, more so the old ones would have. And if the Emperor took non-Chaos warp gods, then they would still be there for him to take. If anything, it would be easier and it wouldn't trigger the 4 Chaos gods to collectively lose their shit. So for this what if, the Primarchs are still in play and the Emperor is still power boosted. So overall, the main difference is that the Elder Empire doesn't actually fall. Now you could argue that without the birth of Slaanesh, the warp storms wouldn't clear, thus the Age of Strife would continue. However, that is boring, so we'll say they do clear, either by the Elder or the birth of their new slut god. The Great Crusade would start as normal and would mostly follow the same path. Chaos didn't get involved too much until the events of Davin as well as the fall of Lorgar. One key difference, however, is that the Elder Empire would still exist and would still be strong as fuck, even with their new slut parties and potential civil conflict. The good news is that the Elder Empire didn't actually extend very far. They were happy to just kind of control the region where the Eye of Terror now is, a large but not super large territory near the Halo Stars, aka a place the Imperium wasn't that keen on anyway. So the Imperium likely wouldn't encounter the Elder too much as it conquered Segmentum Solar, Ultima, and Tempestus, although encounters would be inevitable and increasingly common. The Elder would quickly become aware of humanity's rapid rise and see it as a potential threat. Likewise, the Emperor would know that taking on the Elder Empire is not a great idea. The lore states that the Dark Age of Technology humans actually warred with the Elder and the Elder won, so a diminished human empire would be keen on that. In saying that, the Elder were happy to let the Dark Age of Technology humans coexist in the galaxy, despite their conflict, so perhaps they would just kind of shrug and be like, oh look, they survived their AI uprising. Cool. As to them, humanity would have rose, lost a quick war with the Elder, then got slapped by robots, and then more or less vanished for 5,000 years, which is a blink of an eye to the Elder Empire. Between the Elder respecting the Emperor knowing the Elder's power, and also knowing they can work together, I expect a diplomatic approach to be taken. Perhaps the Imperium aids the non-slutty Elder in overthrowing the slutty Elder, allowing the Imperium to engage in a large-scale war with the Elder whilst forming a tight alliance with the new non-slutty Elder Empire. This would be the major change to the Great Crusade, at least in the early days. The alliance would help humanity deal with the more difficult threats in the galaxy, such as the Orc Empires and the Rangda. However, humanity dealt with those without the need of help in canon, so it'd be easier here. There would still be some serious issues though. The 2 lost Primarchs, Lorgar being humbled on Monarchia and searching for a purpose and a new god, Conrad going insane and renegade after Attack Dawn, Angron progressively going more insane and slowly dying, the Council of Nicaea, and so on. A lot of the shit that went down happened naturally, not because of chaos, with many Primarchs on edge and already at each other's throats. The heresy was like lighting a match in a tinderbox. Most Primarchs were already pissed in some way or another. Angron outright stated that if it wasn't Horus that kicked off the rebellion, he would have rebelled anyway. Now another big question, without chaos, would the Emperor still feel the need to complete his Webway project? After all, the idea was to remove humanity's reliance on the warp to protect it from chaos. The answer is that there would be no Webway project. The amount of effort it took was immense and was only undertaken because the Emperor was desperate to find a permanent solution to chaos. Likewise, the Elder would rage at humanity brute forcing control over some of the Webway and it would end the alliance and go to war. The only reason why the Elder allowed it to happen in canon is because they didn't have the strength to resist it, and with so many Elder now dead after the fall, most of the Webway was empty and unused anyway. Sure, Webway travel is better and safer than warp travel, as even without chaos there is still plenty of warp accidents and warp predators, but it wouldn't have been worth the cost. Thus, the Emperor would either engage in a new project or would simply lead the Crusade to its true conclusion. Angron, in the months before his death, would likely rebel or simply be led into a trap and put into stasis by the Emperor, who would foresee the rebellion. Either way, one legion and their Primarch, or I suppose half a legion, because many World Eaters would not rebel, wouldn't do shit to the Imperium. Lorgar would potentially need to be removed from the Crusade and his legion and confined to Terra if he refused to accept atheism. Conrad would likely be cured of his insanity with the Emperor's help, as the Emperor stated in lore that if he just had a bit more time with Conrad, he could have fixed him. Magnus wouldn't have eaten shit or done something wrong, thus remained as one of the Emperor's favourites. Other disputes, such as the one Mortaran and Lehman had with Magnus, would be quelled by the Emperor, until the Crusade would come to its conclusion and a galaxy about 90% controlled by humanity and 10% controlled by the Eldar would emerge. Now, there are plenty of fan what-ifs about Imperium Ascendant, which is what this is, basically the Emperor's dream realised, and overall it's a pretty fucking positive dream. A galaxy at peace, retired Primarchs, science flourishing, a Perturabo who's allowed to build. Likewise, no heresy means no Pharos device exploding, which means no Tyranids in the galaxy. The main threat would be the awakening of the Necrons 10,000 years later. However, between 10,000 years of Imperium Ascendant and the Eldar Empire not having fallen, the Necrons would have a really shit time. Likewise, the Orcs would be virtually extinct at this point. The worst case scenario would be an all-out war between the Imperium and the Eldar. However, even that would be nothing compared to the bloodshed and suffering in the current setting. So to the surprise of absolutely fucking nobody, a galaxy without chaos would be a pretty awesome galaxy to live in. Yes, another big bad could take the reins at some point. However, I cannot think of any, beyond the Necrons who aren't even that bad, that could fill that. If you enjoyed the video and you want to support the channel, then pick up some Natty Plus subs. 50% off everything. Go nuts, because we won't be doing a sale like that again. Otherwise, my team would fucking kill me. Hit the subscribe button, hit the real subscribe button for more peaceful content. Join the Discord for more memes that I'll see you on the next one. Peace.